Let me ask you something. You've probably already heard the word neurodiversity. You might have done some reading, maybe attended some training, and you've genuinely thought, right, I need to be more aware of this. I need to consider the people in my team. But here's what I want to talk to you about today, because I see this play out time and time again with the managers I work with. You can have all the awareness in the world and still nothing changes. Because the problem isn't just what you know, the problem is the culture around you. And that is a much bigger, more interesting conversation. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to have some really practical things you can actually do. I want to start with what culture actually means, because it's one of those words that gets used all the time but is rarely defined. And when we're vague about what culture is, we end up being vague about how to change it. Culture is simply how things are done around here. It's the invisible rules, the habits nobody ever wrote down but everybody somehow knows. It's the expectation that you'll contribute verbally in meetings, that you'll make small talk in the kitchen, that you'll pick up on the subtle signal when your manager is in a good mood versus when you'd better keep your head down. For many neurotypical people, those unwritten rules are almost invisible. They just operate within them without thinking. But for someone who is neurodivergent, those same invisible rules can take significant cognitive energy every single day. The constant effort of reading the room, of masking, of performing neurotypicality. And the difficult thing about culture is that it lives below the surface. You can't always see it, but your neurodiverse team members are absolutely feeling it every single day. So what does a genuinely neuro-inclusive culture look like? And I want to be specific here, because vague good intentions don't move the dial. It starts with something researchers call micro-behaviours. These are the small, barely noticeable things that happen in everyday interactions. Glancing at your phone when someone is speaking, cutting across someone mid-sentence, forgetting to brief someone about a change of plan until the last moment. On their own, each of those moments can seem trivial. Cumulatively, they tell a person whether they are genuinely valued and safe in your team, or whether they need to keep their guard up. And underpinning all of it is something I talk about constantly in my work around difficult conversations, psychological safety. If your team members don't feel genuinely safe being themselves, asking for what they need, or flagging when something isn't working, you won't know until the damage is already done. There's a framework I often use when working with leaders on culture change. It identifies 6 elements that shape any organization's culture: the history, the values and beliefs, the rituals and ceremonies, the stories that get told, the heroic figures people look up to, and the informal network. All 6 of those have a direct bearing on whether neurodiverse people feel they belong in your organization. Let me give you a few examples. Think about the stories your organization tells about itself. Who gets celebrated? Whose successes get shared? Whose career is held up as the example to follow? If every success story involves someone who is brilliant at presenting, always first to speak up, effortlessly confident in social situations, what does that signal to someone whose strengths look completely different? Or think about your rituals and ceremonies. Does your team culture rely heavily on after-work socials, loud group events, and networking-style gatherings? Are those the spaces where relationships get built and opportunities get discussed? If so, you may be inadvertently excluding people who find those environments genuinely overwhelming, not because they don't want to connect, but because the format doesn't work for their brain. And who are your heroic figures? Who are the role models in your team or organization? Are any of them openly neurodivergent? Because when someone can see that a person who thinks like them has succeeded and thrived, it genuinely changes what feels possible. The good news, and I really mean this, is that culture change doesn't have to be a grand top-down initiative. In my experience, it often starts with one manager who is willing to do things differently and be consistent about it. So here's where I'd start. First, look at your meetings. Meetings are one of the biggest cultural flashpoints for neurodiverse people. The expectation is to process information in real time, respond quickly, manage the social dynamics of a group, and hold eye contact simultaneously. That is genuinely demanding for many people. Try sharing agendas in advance. Create space for people to contribute both in writing and verbally. Build in a moment of thinking time before you invite responses. None of these require a policy document, they just require a decision. Second, get curious before you assume. One of the most powerful things you can do is simply ask, what does a good working environment look like for you? Or, is there anything about the way I run things that makes your job harder than it needs to be? You'll need to have built enough trust for people to answer honestly. And if you haven't yet, that is the more important conversation to focus on first. Third, challenge the invisible rules. Ask yourself, which of the things we just do in this team are actually necessary, and which of them simply replicate how things have always been done? The assumption that a quiet person in a meeting is disengaged, the unspoken requirement to be on and visible in a particular way. Some of those norms exist for good reason, others exist purely out of habit. The ones that exist out of habit are worth questioning. I want to be really honest with you here. You, as the manager, are the single most powerful shaper of the culture your team experiences day to day. Not HR, not the senior leadership team, it is you. The way you run your meetings, the way you give feedback, the stories you tell, the people you visibly respect and celebrate, all of it creates a signal about what is valued and what is safe in your team. That's both a significant responsibility and genuinely a significant opportunity. Creating genuine inclusion requires self-awareness. It requires you to look honestly at your own assumptions. What do you automatically interpret as a lack of engagement? What behaviours in your gut read as professional or unprofessional? Where have those assumptions come from? And are they actually serving your whole team? I'm not saying you need to have all the answers. Nobody does. What I am saying is that the quality of your self-reflection directly determines the quality of the culture you create. And self-awareness is a skill. It can be built. It's not a personality trait you either have or you don't. I want to finish on this because it's where everything I do around difficult conversations and around inclusive culture genuinely comes together. Culture doesn't change through policy documents or awareness training alone. It changes through conversations. The check-in where a manager genuinely asks whether someone is getting what they need. The moment when a team member feels safe enough to say, actually, the way we do this doesn't work for me. Could we try something different? The conversation where you address a team dynamic that's creating tension rather than letting it harden into something much harder to shift. Every one of those conversations requires skill, courage, and a clear sense of what you're trying to achieve. That's exactly what I help managers with inside the Managers Academy and through my Compass Conversation model. If you're managing a team and you want that team to genuinely include and retain neurodiverse people, the most important thing you can do right now is not wait for a culture change program to come from the top. Start with the conversations you're having and the ones you've been avoiding, because culture is built one interaction at a time and you have a lot more influence over it than you might think. If this has resonated with you, I'd love you to check out the link in the description, whether that's the blog post that accompanies this video or to find out more about the Managers Academy. And if you found this useful, share it with a manager you know who's dealing with the people side of leadership without much support. That's exactly who I made this for. I'll see you in the next one.